welcome back.
Need one of those things.
Yeah, that's true. We should actually just get
You
one of
need
those.
Yeah,
one.
we should.
The
We
film
should
things.
absolutely. That's our last. bit.
Welcome back, guys, to the GVS podcast. Actually, we got a name now. Or we think we do. We think we got an official name. We just talked to Marianne about it.
Yeah.
Which is?
Pets, Vets, and Mindsets.
Pets, Vets, and
I
Mindsets.
like that.
An independent podcast produced by Guardian, where we talk about the veterinary industry and everything happening to it now and in the future.
And in the future, yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
And today we got our first guest. We got Jana, Dr. Josel. Maybe you want to introduce yourself, what your position here is at GVS?
Sure. So I joined GVS when there weren't even walls in the buildings. That was like 7-something years ago.
7 years ago in March.
I think. Oh, that's right. Anniversary coming up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I helped organize the hospital, the workings, the people, the departments. I decided that I wanted to be the director of the emergency services department. So I basically hired emergency doctors, scheduled emergency doctors, just to make sure that there always has to be an ER doctor here 24/7, 365. So, that was a bit challenging, but it is what it is. Every specialty or every emergency hospital has to do the same thing. I also did emergency shifts. I did that for about...
I was going to say, you were in emergency for the first 2 years I was here.
At least, yeah. It was like 4-ish years. And then I've graduated vet school in 2003, and then I did an internship for a year. So I've been out of the field for, about 20-something years. And over the course of that time, I've done general practice work and emergency medicine, and then I decided that I wanted to phase myself out. And we saw a niche here for what is now the position of director of culture, which is what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I run the department, and basically it's a department that helps, with lack of a better term, helping people play nicely in the sandbox.
Yeah.
The sandbox in an emergency specialty hospital can be especially nutty, with people throwing sand at one another and
Spicy
pulling each
sandbox.
other's toys and fighting for, things. And
That's a great analogy.
yeah, so there was a real need to help people learn how to get along better, because the better that we can get along, the better patient care we can offer, because we spend less time bickering and blaming and nobody holding themselves accountable for things. And the more we could minimize that, we could just up our game that much more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Director of culture department, sometimes it's called director of people, believe it or not. We kind of went back and forth with the title, is not very common in the veterinary industry. So veterinary companies or businesses, or however you want to say it, they tend to look at bottom line and forget about their employees. I like to think that we care very deeply about our employees and their well-being. We run programs where we encourage people to learn about themselves, what makes them tick, and therefore how they relate to other people, and hopefully in the most productive way. And again, in service of our patients and our clients.
Right, yeah.
So we hope to lessen any blame that goes on, any infighting that goes on.
Which is, always going to happen when you have 200 plus employees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's always going to happen, and it's never going to be perfect.
Would you say that there's been a culture shift in the past 20 years?
I would...
Overall.
Hard to say. I've worked in smaller hospitals where it tends to have more of a family feel to it.
Right. Same
and
people
less,
working together every day. Kind
yeah, and they tend to get along, I found, a little bit better than a huge hospital when there's 200 plus personalities.
Yeah, right.
And we own a couple of smaller hospitals, and they tend to have very much more of they're small. They have 10 or 15 people, much more of a family type feel to it. We're trying to build that here, but with, multiple more people.
I mean, for
than
most
that.
people, the majority of your time of your day is spent at work. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You do get
Exactly.
Work, family stuff.
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah, and
I
people
think
work
that
hard.
The departments for sure have their little family niches, you know.
They do.
But then, you know, again, the departments kind of have to work together.
Yes.
So that's where you get the mixing of people.
Yes.
And personalities.
Yes.
And because I definitely see, you know, I bounce around the different departments probably more than most people here because I'm, you know, shooting with different people at different times.
Right.
And I definitely noticed that, you know, this department will have its little group of best friends, and this department will have its little group of best friends.
Yeah.
But then when somebody from this department has to work in this department for a day, it's you know, sometimes it's not weird because everybody knows each other here, but you know, they feel a little out of place sometimes, or, and you know, like I said, it's kind of impossible not to when you've got this many employees.
Well, I mean, when departments are used to working in a certain manner, and then you're introducing another person, that person might not be up to speed.
Right.
And so there could be some problems involved. There are some people that are really versatile and can jump into any service and do fantastically. Like they just pick up on things. They tend to be known as people that get along with other people. They don't take things too personally. They show up. They do the job that they have come here to do. They hopefully have a good time doing it. And then we move on with our day. And people hopefully go home, have a good quality of life outside of work. But yes, some people segue more easily into, you know, tighter groups of people than others. And I would like to try to minimize that sort of clique mentality. I don't think we have a ton of it here.
No, I don't think so.
But there is a certain amount. There are people that have been working here together for years. So how do you really avoid that? They're friends inside, they're friends outside of work.
Yeah.
So it can be a little difficult for newcomers to figure out their place here. But one of my goals is to make that transition for them as comfortable and productive as possible, so that they can feel at home, so that they can do their jobs, so that they feel competent, so that they feel significant.
Right.
And
that's one of the things I love about just guarding in general, is that even when you find yourself in a position where, like, let's just say I'm working in neuro and I find like it's a little too crazy for me, I've seen so many people just say like, hey, I'm uncomfortable in this position, and it's not a, well, then you don't fit here.
Right.
It's, well, then let's figure out where you fit in this hospital. Whether that means, you know, you're not an assistant anymore, now you're working directly as a coordinator with whoever. And I think that's one of the best things about guarding, is that there's always a place for you as long as you're willing to do the work and continue to try to work hard. And you know, so I think it's a great thing about working here. I mean, even for me, it was like I came in here with this idea, and it was like, you guys didn't have to hire me with the little bit of experience I have. It was like, we're gonna find what works for you here, and we'll make it work.
You get to run with it.
It's great.
Sometimes difficult for anybody in a leadership position, but a lot of effective management, because I know that plenty of people have experiences with ineffective managers all over the place, all over across industries, you know, things like that. It's an issue where there is a role to be played about creating efficiencies, about identifying what everyone's strengths are, what their tool sets are, and be able to apply those, you know, effectively to the right job. So, right, like you said, it may not have been the right fit there, but you still have a useful skill set that can be applied here somewhere. So let's find where that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very cool.
And one of the principles is so there's the bus, right? So does a particular employee, should they be on that bus? Us being the bus.
Yeah.
Should they be on the bus? And so that's a yes or no. And people come here, and sometimes they find that this isn't their happy place, and we encourage them to go be happy. If that's in another hospital, we wish you tons of luck.
Yeah.
We don't want them to be here and be unhappy.
Yeah.
Because then that translates through.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because, Kayla Bauer, for instance, right? When she left, I remember she was joking about how, like, before she left, she was joking with Jason, like, you're not even going to miss me. And, you know, he laughed and whatever, and he said, he was like, it's not that I'm not going to miss you. I just want you to be happy. And if you're not happy here or in the position you have here, then I want you to go and find where you're going to be happy, you know, because it doesn't serve anybody to be in a place where you're not, you know. And listen, no matter who you are, no matter what job you are, there's going to be days where you're like, man, I am not feeling it today.
100%.
But if 80% of your time that you're doing a job, you're like, this is not
I'm
for
not
me.
feeling it, yeah.
You're only doing a disservice to yourself and then the company you work for, regardless of what that company
Absolutely.
is. So it's great that we have the space to not feel like if you're going to quit, like you're going to get blacklisted. It's like Jason would probably gladly call whatever company she ends up working for, or anybody ends up working for, and say, hey, they were great. Yeah. It just didn't work out here.
Right.
So, and I think it's great. It's a good culture. Yeah.
It is.
Overall space to be in.
Yeah. And I think you may have said this. So if you belong on the bus, but maybe you're in the wrong seat. So we do make an effort. So if like one of our client care representatives isn't really happy being a client care representative, but they want to try out being an assistant, then sure, let's get you in an assistant role. Right. If one of the assistants wants to go to tech school, we're like, hell yeah, we're going to actually help pay for that. Yeah. Any number of things. We've moved client care representatives to coordinator positions, which is, a tighter sense of responsibility for each department, has their own coordinator, so they're focused in on that. So, and then we've created, like you're saying, like we sort of created this for you to come in here and do what you do best. But there are people that we really don't want to lose, and we do our best to find something that is a good fit for them, that will make them really happy and satisfied coming to work. Because we want people to walk into this building with a good attitude and a smile on their face. And listen, everybody's got their crap going on outside of here. And we encourage people to try to leave that outside and make this the happiest place that they can be at the time. Get their mind off of everything, head down, doing the work, helping the patients, celebrating wins, being sad about losses. This is a stressful job. Yeah. And it's not for everybody, but we want to make it the best that we can for everybody. So that's part of my job, is to recognize maybe when people aren't that happy and to work with them to make sure that they have a level of job satisfaction that works for them. Yeah. So I like to think that we are special. We're a special hospital because we do care that much about our employees.
I think that's like one of the big upsides about being private, is that you can take that approach.
Yep.
You don't have to go to whoever's at the top and say, hey, this is what we would like to do for this person. Right. You can just say, hey, we know you're great here. Yeah. We love you as a human outside of as an employee, so we want to find the space for you to do well here. Yeah. So, going off of that, what would you say I guess you would kind of hope for that, and there's obviously so many corporate hospitals, but what would you say for the entire veterinary industry would be like your hope? Would it be just like that everybody can kind of take that approach, just so that the industry itself can kind of start healing, for lack of a better term?
People accuse us of being into it for the money.
I see it a lot. Yeah.
Huge. I could go on about that, but I don't think any of us are interested. This is, unfortunately, at the end of the day, like, it's a business and it costs a lot of money. When our vendors hike up their prices 10%, what are we supposed to do with that? Right. And it stresses the employees out when they're faced with that kind of attitude from clients. And I get it. Veterinary care is expensive. It can be very expensive. And I feel terrible when somebody comes in and can't afford it. And it's stressful on the staff. So I just want to also help decrease that kind of stress as well. And I think that a lot of companies or a lot of hospitals could benefit from focusing more on their people and managing, taking into consideration all the outward stuff that comes at us all the time, all the factors, mitigating that and making it so that we're less stressed about things like that, and we can really focus on the important things, sort of accepting the things that we can't change and bettering the care that we can give our employees so that they have a good sense of job satisfaction, less stress, And I really would hope that more hospitals would do what we're doing, because I think that we put our money where our mouth is. Like, I think we really care.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a dedicated department for this. It's not just
one
like a
person
one-off.
doing. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's not just, and we hold everybody accountable here for. We hold everybody accountable for holding everybody else accountable for their attitudes, their behavior, their accountability. That's really important as well. And that also helps for a tighter knit environment.
Right, yeah.
Like, if somebody can call you out on, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, somebody can call you out on your, I'll just say crap, then people start to respect that. If it's done in a constructive manner. Right. Like, you can't just go around yelling at people. But, you know, everybody's held to a certain standard, from the client care reps to the vet techs to the doctors to the CEO to the COO and everybody in between.
Right. Because that's the only way it works.
Right.
You can't just be the people at the so-called bottom.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, well, you know, they don't understand what's going on at the top, so they have to, has to start from the bottom. It's all level playing field.
All levels. We don't. It's funny, we had a specialist start about 2 years ago, and they were like, all right, where's my parking spot? And we were like, you don't get.
What do you
like,
mean?
Dr. Berg,
what do you
the
mean?
CEO and owner of this hospital, does not have his own spot.
Right, yeah.
So
he's got to take the shuttle up just
like
everybody else does.
He's got to take the shuttle up like everybody else does. So, but one of the other things I wanted to mention is, so one of the roles that I play is what I call, like, I mediate between two people, or usually sometimes more, like entire departments that may be having troubles, and that's in service of getting two people who might be very different people and might function completely differently in the way that they do their jobs, to understand each other and come to an agreement, to really have empathy for the other person, figure out how to get along better. And sometimes that's just if somebody comes in a bad mood and is slamming things around, muttering under their breath, just saying like, hey, what's going on with you today? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Do you want me to do this for you? So that you don't have to take it on? Why don't you go outside, get some air? I mean, not when it's 18 degrees, but like go outside, unless you like that kind of stuff. And it's building empathy for other people and not getting bogged down in the stress of this job, which I think is really important. And I don't expect people to always be best friends, but I do expect them to behave like the adults that they are.
And respect each other. Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to like each other, but you do have to respect each other. Yeah.
This is not a sandbox.
Yeah.
We don't fling sand at each other. We don't fight over toys. Like that's not, it's just not a thing.
Right, yeah.
For some people it may start to be a thing, but it's my job to tell them that is not a thing and work through it. Shut it down. Yeah,
and again, this is not unique to us, right? All sorts of companies in all sorts of industries have these interpersonal issues and things like that. Have you noticed in the past, 3 years even, shifts or changes? Like going to these conferences, I've noticed some of the lectures, especially in the management tracks, end up addressing some of these like interpersonal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Team toxicities, things like things of that nature.
Because there is a lot of team toxicity in a good amount of hospitals. So yeah, and they are addressing them more, I think, in conferences. To what effect? I'm not really sure. I mean, I don't really know what's going on in other hospitals per se, but my focus is to make sure that it happens to a minimum here. And I think when the word gets out about that, then people are like, oh, Guardian's a really great place to work. They actually give a crap about their employees.
Yeah.
Because we are what makes this place run. I mean, we can have protocols, we can supply certain services, but if there are no people in this building, like,
if nobody wants to work here,
then we don't have a hospital.
An empty bus doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if there's no driver. No, it doesn't go anywhere. So
have you been inspired by anything outside of here that you start to employ?
Well, I mean, before I went to vet school, I was a psychology major. So honestly, I think a little bit comes from that.
Okay.
But I mean, I've done a lot of training around the work, the culture that we've developed, and we actually have a document that is given to every employee that we expect them to take to heart, to read, to review from time to time, to take to heart. It's up on the, part of it is up on the wall, and that's only like a fraction of it.
Yeah, and they're kind of all over the hospital.
Yeah, and they're all over the hospital. And when I have meetings, I'm like, you know, what's your 1% accountability in this interaction, this negative interaction that we're having? Are you placing blame? Are you being empathetic? Are you being understanding? Like, and what can we do to work on that together? And sometimes, you know, sometimes it works out great, and people are like, oh my God, I didn't know you were mad at me. I'm really upset. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it like that. And there's a hug at the end, and everybody's great. And then sometimes it doesn't work out that well, and I have to kind of finagle something, jerry-rig some solution to get them
some
from
sort of schedule change.
Yeah,
or just
exactly.
Like you know, moving departments.
Yep,
or
I did that actually like 2 weeks ago. But in the end, the two people that I was dealing with wound up being just fine. We needed to give them a break from being in the department together, and then they came back, and you know, they even checked in with one another a few days later. We're like, hey, I think we're doing good. How are you feeling about this? And I was like,
and that proves the success of what you're doing is working.
I hope so.
Because if you didn't even have to mediate that between them in the end of it, and they just kind of did it on their own, that's just proof that it works. You know, like.
And I encourage people. I'll ask. Somebody comes to me and says, I'm having a problem with person B. I'll say, do you want to try to broach this with them on your own, or would you like some help? And I'm more than willing to help. I have, you know, that's my job. And so I've had people be like, you know what, I'm going to give it a try first. I'm like, okay, great. If you need any tools, let me know. And if it doesn't work out the way that you would like it to work out, or you didn't think that it was productive, come see me and we'll work it out. And nobody's ever in trouble when they come to my office. It's confidential. We're not the HR department. That's another thing that's really important. People are not allowed to go to the HR department here and bitch about another person. That's a hard no. That's not what HR is here for.
Right.
There's a fine line between what HR does and what I do. If somebody comes down to them and says, I'm having a problem with B, our HR director goes, wrong office. You go see Jana instead. So
on the other hand, if you say there's a sexual harassment problem,
well,
you go
exactly.
Right, that's the big difference there.
I'm hands off on that.
Yeah. Literally.
You don't want me involved in that. So I'll just go around, yelling at people and doing all sorts of getting them.
It's
in
kind
trouble.
of similar to the discussion we're talking about, like urgent versus emergent, like the urgent care versus the serious problem is that's where you go to HR. You know, that's the
right. So they have their responsibilities.
Where you're pushing somebody's moral capacity as opposed to like your personal capacity.
Interpersonal,
Right.
Exactly. So there is a fine line. I always joke, like, if I call you into my office, you're not in trouble. If HR calls you into their office,
Be a little worried.
You may want to leave and go home. So